Today we are going to learn about the interesting behavior of the wave, that is the refraction. Refraction is the bending of a wave because its speed change when it enters a region where the water depth is different. Now we understand this definition of the refraction. First word we here learn about the bending. What is the bending of the wave? Here we take the two medium. When the water waves enter from the first medium to the second medium, whether its speed is changed, either it become fast or either it become slow. When it slow, it bend toward the normal. When it become fast, it's bend away from the normal. This is the normal between the two medium. When the wave enter from the first medium to the second medium, its speed is changed. When the speed is of the wave becomes slower, it bend toward the normal. When the speed become fast, it bend away from the normal. The concept of the bending, wave is bending when it passing from the one medium to another medium. Second word that is used in the definition, that is the water depth. Now we understand the concept of the deep water and shallow water. In the deep water, here we suppose that is the surface of the water. Inside of the water, that is constant of the water, and here is the bottom. What is the deep water mean? Deep water mean the bottom is far from the surface of the water. This is a large depth of the water. It is the large depth of water between the surface of the water and bottom, that is called the deep water. Now we understand the what is mean the shallow water. Shallow water, here we take the surface of water and here we take the bottom. Between the surface of water and bottom we take the water wave. Here we see that there is a small gap between the surface of water bottom. There what we learned that there is a large depth of water and there is a small depth of water. In the shallow water, small depth of water and the bottom is near to the surface of the water. In deep water, there is a large depth of water and the bottom is far away from the surface of the water. More water. Of course, deep water has the more water and shallow water has the less water. Answer this question: why do water move faster in deep water but slower in shallow water? The example that you are running in a large playground. When the playground is very large, can you run fast? Yes, you can run fast because you have the lot of space and run freely. Now, when you have not the large space or large playground, you have entered the narrow corridor. When you enter the narrow corridor, can you run fast? No, because there is no enough space, everyone, it becomes slow down. Similarly, in the case of the water particles, in deep waters, particles have more room to move, so the water wave travel faster because its bottom is far away from the surface of water. So particles of the waters have more room to move. But in the case of shallow water, the particle of the water cannot move faster because the bottom is too close to the surface of the water. Water particle is strike with this bottom, its speed becomes slower due to the friction. So these water particles pass the disturbance, become slower. So the wave speed become decrease when the water enter into the shallow water, and wave speed become fast when it enter in the deep water. When the distance between the first crust and second crust is large, so wavelength between them become also large. When the large distance between the first crust and second crust, it produces the large wavelength. We learn about the definition of the wavelength. What is the wavelength? It basically it is the distance between the two consecutive crusts and two consecutive troughs. If the distance between them is large, so its wavelength also become large. Take the example of the water wave. This is the deep water. One side we take the deep water, another side we take the shallow water. What happened to a wave when it enters from the deep water to shallow water. We learned that in the deep water, the wave travel faster and in the shallow water, wave travel slower. So when the water waves enter from the deep water to shallow water, here we take the normal. This is the normal, we represented by N. When the water enter from the deep water to shallow water, it bend toward the normal. Why it bend toward the normal? Because its speed is decreased, crust slow down. When the crust is slow down, it travel a short. Before I clap again, the crust has only travel a short distance. Here we learn that the crust that are now close to each other when they enter into the shallow water because its speed is decreased. When the speed is decreased, so distance between the crust is become slower. When the distance between the crust is slower, so the wavelength is decrease. Why wavelength is decreased? Because the distance between the two crusts becomes slower. Here the distance between the two crusts is large and in shallow water distance between the two crusts is small because when the crust becomes slow down, distance between them is slow down, so wavelength is decreased. Wavelength is depend upon the distance between the two crusts. In deep water, the distance between the two crusts is large and in shallow water, the distance between the two crusts is small. So that is why the wavelength is decreased when it enter from the deep water to shallow water. And it is the inverse case when the water wave enter from the shallow water to deep water, then the distance between the two crust and two trough become large. So when the distance between the crust is large, so wavelength is also large. So in the deep water, particles move faster, in shallow water, particles move slower. Enter from the deep to shallow, what happened? And the second case we discussed that is the shallow water to deep water. That is all we discuss about the refraction in the properties of wave. Hope you learned the concept of the refraction. If you learned the concept of the refraction, don't forget to subscribe my channel. Thanks for watching. Allah Hafiz.